Okay. Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, August 4th. This is the Kubernetes K8s Infra Working Group bi-weekly meeting. I am your host, Aaron of Sigbeard, Aaron Krickenberger, also known as Spiff at XP at all the places. We're all going to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct here by being our very best selves to each other. And you can watch this meeting on YouTube later as it is being publicly recorded. So I'm going to go ahead and ask if somebody can take notes for me today, because as much as I wanted to try and front load the agenda with my talking points, I ran out of time. And I know I sometimes have a tendency to say neat stuff. And if it's written down, I'll have forgotten that I said it.
I got your back.
All right, thanks. Post the agenda once again. If anybody wants to put themselves down as an attendee, we'll start. Let's see. And I feel like I recognize pretty much everybody here, so perhaps we'll just skip past the welcome any new members or attendees part of the meeting and go into billing review. Pop open a window and share my screen just as soon as I find the billing report. But I wanted to give us a little time to maybe click around and explore this week, because I saw the numbers jump up a little bit. Okay, so this is the fun part where even is the meeting bar. Okay, there we go. So $237,000 over the last 28 days. So real quick back of the napkin math. If I multiply that by 12, anybody know what that is? It's like 2.7 million, I think. Oh, 2.8 million. So right now, at our current spend rate, we're about to cross over the $3 million mark of our GCP credits. And so we need to potentially take a step back and understand if what we're seeing is a new run rate or if it is money spent due to prototyping. Like even just looking at this visually, right? You can see this isn't even represented. Like if this is the new steady state, then it's more than it's more than 240K in 28 days. So
that looks like compute doubled.
It kind of does. So I'm going to search for the word scale, and I'm going to look just at the scale project. Actually, I'm going to exclude just the scale project, and let's see what that does. Well, the number went down by about a third. And this looks more like the typical artifact stuff that I'm expecting to see. So I don't entirely want to put you on the spot, Arno, but I will have to admit I have not been keeping careful track of what's been going on with this project and what we're running in it. I was wondering if you could maybe talk through what's been happening there a little bit.
Okay, so an update about the budget. We have a brand-new budget for the last 6 months of the year. We basically have half of the budget until the end of the year. So I think it's fine. And I hope we can basically cover that cut. So right now on this project, we have over 15,000 nodes supposed to be running, because we have basically we have three periodic job, and each one have 5K nodes.
That is a surprising number of jobs to me, I guess.
No, that's the number of nodes, but not the number of jobs.
Yeah, so the number of jobs is surprising to me. And this is probably an artifact of me not having talked to scalability as much as you have recently.
Yeah.
My history is like probably 2 years old at this point, where I remembered that we had a 5,000 node job that we ran correctness tests against, the 5,000 node job that we ran density tests against, and that was it. And then we had other smaller 1,000 and 2,000 node jobs that ran a little more frequently.
Okay, that's really changed a lot of it over time. So I'm going to give you my, basically what I know is right now they have, if you go on test grid, I don't know.
Let's see. That's great.
I will close. We're looking for K8s Infra, just canary stuff.
Going to the canaries. Okay.
Yeah, okay. So you will see the yeah, you have an interesting screen. So I can basically show you basically the list in the dashboard.
Let's see.
Okay, when you see everything with prefix GCE master, that's basically most of the periodic job running on that project.
We also have Kubernetes jobs running here.
Yeah.
So these two are what I'm talking about. That's a 5,000 node job, and that's a 5,000 node job. The Kubernetes jobs, to my understanding, is not actually 5,000 physical virtual machines, but it is virtual nodes that run on a smaller number of physical machines.
Yeah, but you have a third one, which is Kubernetes 5,000 canary, and this one is also, I think this one is also, if I'm not wrong, 5K nodes.
Okay.
But I did some investigation, and what's happening is we have since July 33 a constant cluster with 5K nodes, and that was basically created when I added a pre-submit with 5K nodes. So I did some investigation today. I'm gonna destroy that cluster probably tomorrow.
Yeah, and I want to
just find 5K. Yep. Okay. You know, when you look at compute engine,
I was going to see if the compute dashboard would show something.
you want to
none of this works. Okay.
okay, the number you see of active VM is just 2 jobs. I mean, it's 1 cluster is running, and that's a bug. It was supposed to get destroyed after the job was finished, but it's not the case. There's another job with 5K nodes running actually.
Okay. It's good to know.
So I'm gonna take off that shadow cluster tomorrow or Friday.
Is there any reason we can't take it down today?
If you can take it down, I'm all for it.
All right.
You just have to basically delete all the instance groups.
All right. I'll take a look at it.
Okay. But my question is, what's the baseline for this project? Because we still don't know what's the baseline for this project once we finish to migrate all the scalability jobs.
Yeah.
Are we
So-
supposed to have the same number, knowing they want to increase the number of nodes also at the pre-submit?
So this gets into like the conversation that maybe it's time for us to have, which is like we run more jobs than we feasibly have a budget for. Like every SIG has a whole bunch of, I'll just try and pick on, if I can get to it, SIG API machinery for grants. They have a dashboard that is 0.6 passing. Actually, they're not the worst offender. SIG cluster lifecycle. Yeah, there are a bunch of like perma-failing jobs everywhere. COPS is one of my favorite. There are 638 jobs here. Not all of them are perma-failing, but these are all jobs that the community is not paying for yet. And I think we're gonna have a conversation at some point about whether it is in the community's best interest to fund all of these. So the jobs that currently run on community infrastructure are things that are real clear, bright lines. They're the jobs that are either, I love how I'm still scrolling here, the jobs that are either like release blocking or merge blocking, the things that the vast majority of contributors use today. It's these jobs. Oh, darn it. I thought for a second they might actually all be green for once. That was amazing. So like all of these run on community infrastructure. And then if we were to open it up from that, it's like, well, let's look at all the jobs that are informing. And this is less of a green picture. Many of these are post submits, they're just image pushes. But this is where the scalability jobs live. So these two 5,000 node jobs make a ton of sense to me. It's like really clear and obvious to be migrated over. Once we start getting to all of the jobs that are on individual SIGs dashboards, I think we need to have a conversation about budget and like how much is each SIG supposed to be allocated in terms of an infrastructure spend for their jobs.
I
Because,
want to call out something.
sure.
Basically, test grid represents the job for basically not only the community, but also other projects, which means is sometimes it's unclear to me where those jobs are running.
You are correct. Perhaps a better way of displaying this would be if I go to crowd.k8s.io. And then I just look for jobs that are in failure state. So it's kind of unfair because a lot of these are pre-submits. So maybe I'll take pre-submits out by going to periodic, and we can take a look at that. So all these jobs. And for grins, I'll even go and I'll take the cluster that they run on, and I will select default. Because I know default is the google.com build cluster. This is the cluster we were having so many problems with back in the day, which is why we picked the release blocking and merge blocking jobs and put them over to a community cluster that auto scaled. Every single one of these jobs, like, are they worth the money? I don't know. it's also really, really difficult for me to tell you how much money each of these jobs costs. Because the way the crowd works is there's the spent, like if I think about the resources used, it's the compute time for running a given pod. And then if that pod happens to go spin up or touch other resources, it's all of the resources that that pod uses. Because we use Vasquez to do, to manage like pools of GCP projects, and it'll just check a random GCP project out of the library. We don't really have the historical data to connect which job used which project at which time and then spun up which things at which time. So there are ways through this, but like I can't historically look at what we have and say, well, here's roughly how much it's all going to cost. It's the sort of thing that now that this stuff is out in the open, we can we could maybe set up Vasquez pools, for example, that are allocated per SIG and say, okay, like we'll look at just the projects that you are using, and this is how much budget you get for that pool of projects or something. That doesn't necessarily take into account how we bill or budget the usage of pods on Proud itself. So I'm going to stop talking now because I see Eddie's hand.
I just thought of something. So we are planning the contributor summit for KubeCon NA. It's going to be format of a couple pre-canned sessions, and then there will be a unconference style open sessions to discuss. So we should definitely get something regarding the testing infra and stuff on the agenda for that.
Sure.
The issue about this is we don't know who is going. I'm not sure I'm going. I'm not sure Aaron is going. I'm not sure Tim is going. I'm not sure Jim is going.
It's going to be virtual and in person. So
my my employer is fully supportive of people who want to stay remote. I don't know if their actual policy is supposed to be public, but it's not likely I'm going to be there in person. But I am happy to have this discussion. Like, doesn't even have to be attached to KubeCon. Like, I think all I'm suggesting is like, this is a sign that it's time for us to start having that discussion, because I think this is one of the gnarlier policy questions that the community as a whole is going to have to wrestle with. It kind of even gets knotted up in the, well, sure, there are all these jobs that are considered release blocking and merge blocking, but like, who owns the cost of what is the set of merge blocking and release blocking jobs, right? Like if SIG scalability says it's extremely important for them to have their 100 node VM jobs run against every pull request, but that's preventing, but in terms of budget, like that prevents SIG node from standing up jobs that run a VM for the Cartesian product of operating system and container runtime implementation. Like, who's supposed to win there? Who gets priority? I honestly don't know, but we should figure out a framework for that. And it is going to take time to kind of collect the data so we can have a well-informed discussion. But I think we can come up with a number of hypothetical use cases as well, just to figure out what we should be doing. Having said that, like, I'm actually like super excited to see this, because I sort of suspected that our 5,000 node scalability jobs were a non-trivial cost. And Arnaud has done fantastic work in collaborating with scalability to figure out all of the random GCS buckets and quota changes that are necessary for us to get to this point where we can actually see that, yes, in fact, the scalability jobs are not cheap. So if there's any way I can more firmly emphasize that this is not Arnaud's fault, this is the fruits of Arnaud's labor, and it's awesome. like, this is cool. I'm just like so excited to have a gnarly policy discussion. Okay. So
Just reminder, we have an issue open about this, about what you say. I remember, I know we talked about this kind of last year when we tried to build the CI policy.
yeah,
I think one option was not to migrate the failing job. Like if we identify one job being failing for like a year, we don't have to migrate it.
yes. I am going to see if I can. I don't know if that's so much a K8s Infra thing or not. It could be. I was going to try and tee up a sort of a CI policy version 2, son of CI policy sort of proposal that described ways that we could policy a lot harder. And I still think even if it's a human being looking at jobs and being like, well, these are perma-failing, I'm going to delete them. I am okay with that. I really need, with sufficient time to say like, hey, this has sig node's name on it. I'm gonna delete these. Sig node, please speak now or forever hold your peace. I think that's still a fair approach to take, at least initially. Just to help us sort of, as us as a community, not us the working group, but us as a community sort of prioritize what should be moved over and what should the community pay for. And then it's the other question, like Google shouldn't necessarily be footing the bill for all this stuff. So, if it's still really necessary, like how can we get the funds to make this work, or how do we reduce our costs to make this work? So I'm going to crawl off my soapbox and stop my share on that. Did anybody have an ICR? No, you have your hand up. I can see my screen again. You are muted right now.
I have an idea I want to implement in the first is Q1 of next year, which is basically use commitments. Let me find the issue about this quickly.
Now I'm muted. Reserved or committed instances instead of on-demand instances.
Not really. It's basically apply, basically calculate or try to define the baseline that try to say if we can commit basically resource consumption for a year as a first phase, and later commit 3 years of resource consumption, and
Okay.
that's gonna be applied to the 5K project, the B cluster, AAA, and basically some of the scale project managed by Basco. But
Okay.
the one thing I want to do is basically trying to apply the vision we have for the last milestone. In January or next year, we basically define the baseline and we ask for commitment.
I think that's a completely valid thing we should do. I'm also just really genuinely curious if there are some levers we can exercise internally to say, see if we can get this retroactively applied or something. But that starts to get a little out of my wheelhouse at the moment, but I think that is a solid idea and we should make sure we loop Tim in on that. My understanding is what's happened with the credits is this whole program started about now in August. And so the credit renewal deadline came up in August, which is just kind of a weird squirrely thing in terms of lining up with financial stuff. And so we've renewed for enough credits to get us to the end of the calendar year. And then that way we have a discussion about renewal of credits at a time that makes more financial sense for everybody. So I think that's the amount of time we have to sort of work through, doing this better. And I agree with your idea of being able to do capacity planning is super important for this. Like I said, I just sort of always assumed that we were going to have to do capacity planning at some point, but the work of just like pitching stuff over was the more important work to do until capacity planning became important. And this is the signal that it's time to start thinking about it. I also didn't plan to take 30 minutes to talk about all that, but thank you all for entertaining me.
Thank you, Aaron.
So next things I'm going to blow through kind of quickly. So just as a heads up, if you're wondering why this doc suddenly got a lot shorter, it's because I was trying to type up the agenda this morning and each character took like 3 seconds to land on the page. My browser was not happy because the document was over 120 pages long. So I did the thing that we've done for documents that grow this long, like the community docs and some other SIG docs. I charted it out into meeting notes by year. So all the previous meeting notes are still around. They're just linked up at the top of the doc in documents that are titled per year. The next thing I'll go over real quickly is the proposal to convert this working group into a SIG. Do people here want me to walk through that? Do people have any questions?
It's probably about time.
Yeah, okay. Essentially, so I won't spend a lot of time, but yeah, I agree. It seemed like the natural time to start this conversation. Like, I don't think anybody here wildly objects to it. So now it's the process of seeing what the rest of the community thinks about this. And should it move forward, I will see how many things I can rename in a quick flurry before our next meeting. I may not get them all, but I'm making sure that like the Zoom link's not going to change, the calendar links aren't going to change, all that stuff. So I'll just be communicative in Slack and on the mailing list if it looks like we do need to change things, let you all know accordingly. And for sure, like if you have any opinions or questions or comments, super open to it. Moving forward to review of 122, I do not feel like, given the amount of time that we've taken and the amount of prep I've done, I don't want to spend a lot of time here. So I was just going to scan the board real quickly and see if there was anything that jumped out and look at the remaining things that are still tagged as milestones B122 to get a brief update on them. So I will share the board. Okay. So let's just go through the things that are still tagged 122 real quick. Just opening up all the issues here. Okay, Kate's CI robot as contributor. I swear I feel like we talked about this last time, or no. Is it enough of a contributor to be considered a member to the Kate's IO repo?
And did you follow the question?
So the the K8s Infra CI robot, is it a member of the Kubernetes org?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Cool. So at this point, what remains is making it a member of these other two orgs, but that if we do that, we give it org admin privileges. And so I think what I'm going to do is move this issue to blocked and move it to the next milestone.
About the other orgs, I think it's better to finish deploy the K8s Infra instance before we move forward with.
I completely agree. That's why I'm just moving it to blocked. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody who works on the auditor is here at this meeting, but I feel like the auditor has gotten significantly less noisy with its alerts in the K8s Infra channel. So I'm really tempted to close this, but it seems like based on Tyler's latest comment that they're still working on this. So I'm going to move it to milestone 123 since there might be more to do. This issue, deprecating the google.com locations where Kubernetes CI builds are hosted. The only reason this is still open is because I need to send out this email. And I was just a couple sentences away from finishing up the email before this meeting started. So I will send this out soon, and I will close this as part of V122. But I did want to show this cool graph. It's in Bezos units. There used to be a ton of traffic. The time span here is 6 weeks. There used to be a ton of traffic to Kubernetes release dev like 6 to 4 weeks ago. And then we sort of made this concerted push to start moving most of the jobs over, which got rid of most of the traffic. And then it was about cleaning up a bunch of the other repos like ops and the cluster API repos and things like that, which got us down to this level of traffic. I think I turned on GCS logs for this, but I'm not going to bother doing the analysis for now because I'm assuming the traffic that remains is from older release branches that are publishing to these buckets. You know, our deprecation window or our deprecation policy is older supported releases of Kubernetes are going to keep pushing to these places, but as the versions fall out of support, so too will the builds disappear from these buckets over time. And eventually this will drop to nothing and we'll move it. The Kubernetes CI images GCR repo also had basically no traffic since Lubomir and a bunch of the cluster API folks already worked to switch cluster API projects to get their images another way a while ago. So yay and thank you everybody who helped out on that. Consider using Google managed SSL certs for AAA. The only thing that remains is the self-signed cert for K8s IO Canary. Is that correct? Is there any reason we can't make that a managed cert?
We can make that a managed certificate. I think the real my real issue is how we apply that to the Canary jobs, also the production. No, to the Canary domains, also to the production domain. Because we basically run the test on the both set of domains. So we have two options. We can basically shut down cert manager, create a self-signed certificate manually, and basically apply that to the Canary ingress. It can be a 10-year certificate. The problem with that is every time we add a new domain to the Canary domain, we need to regenerate the certificate again.
Okay. And then,
So I'm gonna try to look at if we can basically convert that in the managed certificate.
what's the challenge with using managed certificates?
For this particular case, I don't know.
Okay.
Because like I said, it's like the managed certificate controller is very very obscure to me because I don't have logs or anything except the event in the resource managed certificates.
All right.
I can go check the code source for the controller, but I still don't have time for that right now.
That is quite all right. I think the short version is like, I think we still want to really try to do managed certificates and get rid of Cert Manager. And this is the thing that's holding us back. So I'm putting it into 123. Migrate away from K8s Federated conformance. So I need to follow up with Ben. He basically created this checklist of all of the Google brief context. This is a project that hosted GCS buckets that people could request write access to so that they could publish their results there on an ongoing basis. So this is one of those test grid things that's not populated by crowd jobs, for example. We have found over time that a number of these have gone stale. And so we wanted to basically try removing access to it. And we've also instead created a K8s conformance project over in K8s Infra that is community owned and not Google owned. And so we're just kind of picking through and finding, people who are responsive or non-responsive. We set a deadline a while back of 4 weeks, and it's been 6 weeks. So I think we're real close, but since we passed the 122 release deadline, I'm going to kick it into 123. But I think we're real close to moving a full project off of our list of migration. This one, we've had a couple PRs that break image promotion. Linus and Tyler, who've both been working on a container image promoter, are aware of this issue and have begun working on it. So hopefully I don't have to look really super duper carefully at image promotion PRs when they come in. I usually don't. I think it's usually the individual SIGs just smash that approve button and then jobs break because they never saw the PRs fail tests. Last thing, migrating the K8s artifacts GCS logs bucket to its own project. I feel like Arnaud and Rian have been collaborating on this, but to restate what we're trying to do, there was concern that having a bucket that contains a lot of personal identifying information inside of the K8s artifacts project was going to allow people who had access to the K8s artifacts project but were not cleared for PII to view the contents of that bucket. So what we decided to do was to create a separate project whose sole purpose is to contain PII. And then we've set up artifact logging or like GCS access logs for most of our buckets to go to that single special purpose project. We have not yet switched over any of the projects that the II folks have been using to do their storage analysis. And I want us to flip the switch there. I'm apparently looking at the wrong issue, but there's another issue where I discovered the permissions on the bucket aren't quite right. Because like what I wanted to do was just rsync from the bucket you have been using to the bucket we're going to use, such that you didn't lose any historical data. I guess I'm kind of wondering if this is something we can move on in the next like week or two. We should be taking point on this. And I think this is a question kind of directed at Hippie and the II folks.
Yeah, I think that's fine. To make sure I hear it clearly, you want us to move the data that's currently there into the new bucket which currently exists, verify the permissions are the same, and go ahead at that point, let us flip the switch, or, ask you and Arnaud to flip the switch so that the new data goes there as well. We need to coordinate that flip so that we don't
Yeah.
lose it.
I think what I'm proposing is that this does not need your involvement. At some point, I am one of the few people who has the permissions to flip the switch to have all new logging data land in the new bucket. What I need from y'all is to then flip your stuff over to read from the new bucket. And what I want to do before you flip that switch is rsync over all the historical data so that from your perspective, it doesn't look any different. You're just pointed at a slightly different bucket.
Okay. Rian, that's kind of everything that you need. You've got the reporting. So we just need to copy that data over and update where your buckets are pointing, and then give Aaron the go ahead to pull the switch. I think that would take, yeah, we'll do that in the next 7 days.
Okay. Yeah, because the worst that would happen is I flip the switch and I rsync all the historical stuff over, but you're not pointed at the new stuff, so your results are gonna,
Okay, to go ahead and pull the switch now, and we'll update where we're going, where we're looking at the new data, because I don't think it's gonna be hard on our side. We're still using Data Studio and all that. It'll be broken for a bit, but definitely it'd be better to do that now and let us change what we're doing with it in place rather than trying to organize some type of cutover.
Yes, I agree. I genuinely, I would do it today, but I'm juggling a couple other things.
Anyway, in good time. It's Thursday here. We only got one more day of ability, so
Yeah.
You'll get to it before next week. That's choice.
Okay. I also just wanted to take the time real quick to kind of celebrate some of our successes. I'm gonna go through these real quick and see what jumps out. I know we had Carlos managed to use K8s Infra stuff in order to publish GCP VM images, which are now usable by other projects for the Cluster API GCP, Cluster API provider GCP sub-project, which is really cool. It's the first time we've had somebody do more than binaries or more than container images from a staging project. I think that was neat. Arnaud and Tim Hawken and others migrated us away from Cert Manager, except that one cert, to GKE managed certificates. And I've never had to look at an email about our certs expiring and flip out. It's really been great. I bent a lot of bash so that our audit job, so that we have an audit job that opens up pull requests automatically. I bet there's one open right now. And it's become a lot less noisy than it used to be. This started from a script that the II team wrote, and we've since sort of improved it to be a little more selective about when it bumps a PR. It only updates this PR when there are changes instead of every time. We've improved a little bit how it scrapes GCS buckets. So we're now getting feedback every 2 hours instead of every 6 hours. And it's pretty easy to see. We've added more information to what's dumped. So now I know that like the Provill trusted cluster just upgraded to Kubernetes 120. That's awesome. And you know why that happened? It's because we moved to release channels, which is totally something that Arnaud pushed. Never had to think about upgrading a cluster ever again. And we've managed to catch all the like deprecated and action required type stuff to hit these release channels because Arnaud helped me get conf test up and running, and then started writing open policy agent policies to sort of catch the deprecated resources that we needed to change. Let's see. I've some of the bash I bent allowed us to add custom roles like the audit viewer role, so that the II team is capable of looking at whatever they need, wherever they need. And we are much more comfortable adding contributors to this. We made a ton of progress in using CI images, but we didn't quite get there. Thanks to Arnaud and Jim Daga's help, we managed to reorganize all of the apps that run on Kubernetes infrastructure under a single apps directory. And then thanks to that, I was capable of setting up a deploy job so that if any one of these directories gets hit by PR, there's a job that automatically deploys them because they all have a deploy.sh script. With a couple exceptions, like publishing bot is still a manually deployed thing, but it is so amazing that like K8s.io, you can make a change to an Nginx config and it'll just magically deploy. And if you potentially make a typo that causes that Nginx config to break Nginx, it doesn't hit prod and break prod right away, which is also cool, just hypothetically speaking. And I don't know, I think I'm going to stop there, but I just wanted to like take a moment to celebrate and thank everybody for all of the work that we've done during the last release cycle, because it was a lot. Oh yeah, the last one I noticed was we got our Terraform to Terraform 1.0, and we've moved from using Terraform just to manage like a few GKE clusters here and there to like standing up service accounts, setting up IAM, provisioning GCS buckets, and using it to help the II team sort of stand up some of their stuff or stand up the PII project. I'm really excited about potentially leaning harder into that. So that's 122. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to stop my share and just punt on.
Okay, that's awesome. I think it's cool to celebrate together. So, hoorah!
Yeah. I think maybe by the next meeting, I plan to sort of do this in presentation form or slide form, so it's something we can share out more broadly with the rest of the community to help people understand, like, here is everything that we have done, and if this sort of thing interests you, come help us out. I'm going to skip doing this for 123 because we're almost out of time already, and I'd rather talk to some of the other things that folks have on their agenda. So, Arnaud, you had something about container image hosting for Elector.
Before I start, Eddie, can we skip your item, and I'm gonna be your butler for migrate Trish Party.
Works great. Thank you.
Okay. So my request is kind of simple. The next election for the communities is supposed to happen this year. Say Contribex use a CNCF internship to build a platform that's gonna be used for the election. It's called Elector, and they plan to use that to basically do the election this year. Josh Beckers was the mentor for this internship, and he asked me if it's possible we basically host the container image for this project in the KK Infra.
So I have a real clean, crisp answer. If Electo is a Kubernetes subproject,
Nope.
If it's not a Kubernetes subproject, it's not part of the Kubernetes project, it's not something that the Kubernetes infrastructure working group can support.
But it's gonna be used by the community.
I understand that we use it. There are other things, like the only exception that we've made thus far is images that are packaged up as part of the Kubernetes release, where we require the utmost like build provenance capabilities to know for sure that this is the version of etcd or DNS or whatever. But other stuff, like we don't host Triage Party, and people are actively depending on Triage Party to run their portion of the community. However, if he has his hand raised,
We don't host API Snoop either. And that's because that's the CNCF's job, to help host the things that our community needs. And I'd love to find a way to further that conversation so that the things that need to go beyond the container of Kubernetes, but serve a broader thing that are a dependency of Kubernetes, that we can work with the CNCF to find a way for that to work. I know that I'm actively working with Priyanka on a program to allow our projects to use some credits. And I think for something like this, I'd love to kind of connect with Josh and see what avenues are there. It may not fit into our current thing, but I definitely want to make sure we find a way for this to work, to support the efforts of the Kubernetes community without necessarily shoving it into the box that is Kubernetes.
Like I definitely have a dream of copy pasting everything we're doing here and using it as a much larger umbrella for like everything that CNCF related. But one thing at a time, we still have a lot of infrastructure to migrate just for Kubernetes. So this is where our focus is. I've had to give this answer to other things that are related, like Cryo was the most recent one, where it's like, yes, I think it's cool that we've got Cryo, or like, anyway.
Arnaud, got your hand up?
Yeah, okay, so we still need, we plan to use Elector for the election, which means at some point we need to have some kind of infrastructure running in a dedicated project or in Kubernetes public. Is it possible we basically, let's say, phrase Elector at some point, build and publish on a private registry so we can use it for the election?
Yeah, like my suggested path forward would be, I think GitHub has a container registry that is available for public repos at no cost. So if you publish the image there, the Kubernetes community definitely runs software that is not built and produced by the Kubernetes community to run itself. Again, I point to Triage Party. So I have zero problems standing up a deployment of Elector in K8s Infra. That makes total sense. It's just that we can't host the image as part of the project unless the Elector itself is part of the project. But I totally want to like support running it as part of our infrastructure. Does that make sense?
Kind of. We are out of time, so I don't want to basically go over that conversation.
I would say open up if my answer, I am but one of, N people involved in this. I think opening up an issue to have the discussion would be good. It's yet another reminder that we need to kind of put together our case law or historical precedents for what is in scope and out of scope for this.
Okay.
Or SIG or whatever we're going to call it.
Okay. Last question is it's a simple question, also a complex question. Where are we running that infrastructure? Are we put everything in Kubernetes public or basically in a dedicated project? It's not cost us. There's nothing to basically run, just a deployment plus a database.
I would say Kubernetes public. That's fine.
Okay, so we don't care about security. Like we have the list of routers. We publish everything against database. Who's gonna access to that Elector system?
We can talk about that more offline. I still feel like Kubernetes public should be good enough to run all of it. It's good enough to run the rest of our infrastructure. I feel like
okay.
I feel like I saw your hand up.
I just wanted to make sure that, if possible, if we could get the YouTube of this up today, because I'm about to help run a weekly 3 to 7 p.m. thing locally. And this would be lovely material to say, this is what it looks like to run the cloud together.
It's going to depend on how quickly Zoom finishes transcoding.
Absolutely. It's an invitation to participate, not a demand or a request.
I totally do what I can. Yeah, this, you noticed, like, I've had to upload this to my personal YouTube channel again, or Arno's had to upload it to his because our automation broke. And I want to, somewhere down the line, I want us to explore that.
I don't mind taking on that burden if you'll add me to the thing so that you are free to govern and bring all the skill sets.
I knew how to do that. I would.
Yeah,
It's
the problem is you're gonna talk to contracts about because they're looking at very basically some simple option about this because it's not broken for us, it's broken for every
Oh,
thing
no.
in the community.
Okay.
So
Thank you for your time.
yeah. Thanks everybody so much. Yeah, I super appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for all you've done to make this such a successful release cycle for K8s Infra stuff. And I look forward to seeing you all again in 2 weeks and online between now and then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Have a happy day.